The time has come for everyone to clean up their own backyard.
By now, everyone has heard that the Republican Party has formally voted to declare the January 6th insurrection as a form of, quote, legitimate political discourse conducted by, quoting again, ordinary citizens. This angers me a lot because of what I'm about to read you from Salon.com, a not-bad piece called Donald Trump is Done Pretending He is Now Openly Celebrating the Capitol Riot, written by Amanda Mendicanti. To anyone who was watching the January 6 events unfold on live television, one thing was perfectly clear. Donald Trump was excited and proud about the violence he incited. As the timeline of his actions showed that day, he was so wound up tweeting invective at Congress and his Vice President Mike Pence that he barely slept the night before. Once the riot was underway, Trump spent hours resisting the pressure to call off his dogs, instead tweeting more invective and ass-covering calls to, quote, stay peaceful, that the crowd knew not to take seriously. He was also reportedly gleefully entranced by the footage of the insurrection. After 3 hours of rioting, he finally told his crowd to go home.
We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
But only because it was clear that the riot wasn't going to overturn the election. The blood was still mopped off the floors. Still being mopped off the floors when the great GOP gaslighting began. Republicans fell in line behind this narrative that the riot was not incited by Trump, but that it was an entirely self-directed action of a few thousand kooks. It was a wild coincidence that started after Donald Trump's incendiary speech. Trump has always clearly chafed at the exception that he can go along with this narrative, wanting instead to publicly gloat about this demonstration of the power he has over people. Now, a year after the riot, Trump appears to be done with pretending to disapprove of this riot. He is circling back his initial instinct, which was to celebrate the glorious MAGA revolution he always wanted to be. This is most obvious in Trump's promise over the weekend to consider pardoning the January 6 rioters if he regains the White House in 2024.
We will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly.
Politico soon reported that this was hardly some new urge of Trump's. He spent 2 weeks between the riots and Joe Biden's inauguration asking advisors if he could issue a blanket pardon for everyone involved. He was waved off the idea because it conflicted with the GOP's strategy of denying Trump's role in the riot. Trump, forever the coward he is, went along with the demands, even though it meant not getting the credit for the mayhem that he unleashed, but making this promise of pardons to a cheering crowd of thousands of supporters. he is sending a strong signal that he's done pretending to feel anything but gleaming pride over inciting an insurrection. Which isn't to say that Trump is no longer torn between wanting to celebrate the insurrection openly and worried about the legal jeopardy that might flow from that stance. Over the weekend, he released an unhinged statement in which he outright said he had wanted to overturn the election. But when the members of the January 6th committee pointed out that was tantamount to a confession, Trump tried to walk it back with another statement about how he meant to say he just wanted to send, quoting him, back the votes for recertification or approval. The pardon promise also could create legal problems for Trump. As January 6th committee member Representative Adam Schiff told MSNBC Wednesday night, the rally speeches, and I quote, very important evidence as to his intent that Trump desired and condoned the violence. No doubt Trump's lawyers are advising him of the same dangers, and yet he can't or won't stop trying to publicly recast the insurrectionists as heroes. In a Newsmax interview this week, Trump falsely insisted that no one died on January 6th only except Ashley Babbitt, who he described as one young fine woman. And we probably know what that means.
Don't forget, with the exception of one young, fine woman, nobody died on January 6th. Nobody died on January 6th. They like to say 5 people, but nobody died on January 6th.
Nobody was intentionally killed.
The one person who died was Ashley Babbitt. She was killed by a ruthless man that never should have used his gun to shoot her. She was killed.
And he's a hero to the left. That cop is a hero.
I think it's a disgrace. And in fact, they wanted to shield him, but he couldn't get on television fast enough. Mm-hmm. I saw his interview. Mm-hmm. And he thinks it was great that he shot her and killed her. And she didn't have a gun. She didn't have anything. There was no reason to do that. It's a disgrace. But she was the person that died. And they're not treating these people the same way. You don't see, with all of the killing and all of the fires and all of the burning.
Making a martyr of Babbitt, who was shot because she was trying to lead a charge to run down fleeing members of Congress, is central to the pro-insurrection narrative. Trump may feel helmed by legal concerns, but his political instincts clearly tell him that recasting the Capitol insurrections as a glorious revolution is the right move. Certainly the cheers he got from promising pardons underscores that the base is with him, but many Republican leaders aren't so sure.
I think it's inappropriate. I don't want to reinforce that defiling the Capitol was okay. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do anything that would make this more likely in the future. And I hope they go to jail and get the book thrown at them because they deserve it.
I do not think President Trump should have made that pledge to do pardons. We should let the judicial process proceed.
Look, the folks that were part of the riots and frankly the assault on the U.S. Capitol have to be held accountable. There is a rule of law.
And they really want to stick with the BS story that the riot was just a random thing that happened and Trump had nothing to do with. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has been surprisingly outspoken about this, telling reporters that the riot was, quoting him, an effort to prevent the peaceful transfer of power, and insisting people who participated should be punished. Even Ted Fled Cruz, who has always been trying to be on the vanguard of the right-wing nuttery, has been queasy about celebrating the riot itself, preferring to hide behind conspiracy theories, blaming the violence on the FBI. But Trump's instinct to simply come out in favor of the storming of the Capitol sadly makes a lot of sense, politically, if not legally. The current GOP possession which amounts to disproving the rioters while supporting their larger anti-democratic aims, is incoherent. The vast majority of Republicans, both voters and leaders, have decided to embrace the big lie, largely because it creates the pretext to pass a bunch of laws and seize electoral offices in such a way that the next coup in 2024 could be successful. Trying to be for the big lie, but against the violence that flows from it, is too delicate a needle to thread. It's easier and simpler to stand for the whole caboodle, the big lie, the insurrection, the ongoing coup. And Trump understands better than anyone that easy and simple are huge advantages in political messaging. Plus, Heather Digby Patton, who's been arguing at Salon that Trump is clearly worried that the walls are closing in and that it will be impossible to successfully hide the evidence that he and was both attempting to overturn the election and that he deliberately called on violent mob to in order to make that happen. This is a fairly standard Trump strategy when he realizes that he can't cover up a crime. Instead, he simply owns it and says it was a good thing and dares anyone to do anything about it. So far, that's worked beautifully for him. And the continued inability of Attorney General Merrick Garland to arrest Trump for one of his many public crimes suggests it will continue to work for him. The only question is how long will it take for the rest of the GOP to fall in line. They also have a pattern when it comes to Trump's crimes, from his admitted sexual assaults to his efforts to steal the election. First, there is resistance and disapproval, but soon they give in and either excuse or, in most cases, outright defend Donald Trump's behavior. There's a growing political pressure within the Republican Party ranks to go along with the January 6th was good, actually, narrative. What I just said about this earlier in this video. A proposal to formally kick Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming and Republican Adam Kinzinger of Illinois out of the Republican Party has 50 Republican House co-sponsors already. It's not because the two of them support free and fair elections, as they are fully on board with the voter suppression efforts going on at the state level. It's just that they sit on the January 6th committee and are appalled by the violence of the riot that has put them in odds with the party. Kicking them out amounts to a symbolic vote of confidence for the insurrection itself. For most Republicans, it would probably be easier to move on from the insurrection, which is to say, talk about anything else while quietly supporting legislative efforts to make the next coup stick. But Trump is not going to let them. As long as the January 6th committee and the media keeps pushing out evidence how deeply Trump was involved and how extensively the coup efforts were, Trump is going to keep circling back to the idea that every action he took, no matter how violent or criminal, was justified and noble. As long as he does that, Republicans are going to be forced to choose between pandering to the Trump base and trying to distance themselves from the violence that turns the moderates off the moderate voters. But we always know how the story ends. Republicans always cave to Donald Trump. And so will it be when it comes to the story of whether the riot was good or bad. It's just a matter of time. Quite honestly, the Republican Party is completely complicit as to what happened on January 6th. The Republican Party is now the party of domestic terrorism, pure and simple. I don't care who's watching this. I don't care what you say about it. It is the facts. The Republican Party has embraced a terrorist attack, all for the sake of two things: hoping to stay in office or higher office, and especially to pander to their God King, Donald Trump. I keep saying this, and I'm just going to say it one more time. You can either be for the United States Constitution, the people of this country, or you can be for Donald John Trump. You can't be for both anymore. Answer the question. Which are you? Are you for the United States of America? Are you for the United States Constitution? Are you for freedom, liberty, and justice for all? Are you for the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Are you for equal rights of all people, of all races and sexual orientations, religions, and whatnot? Are you for the United States of America, or are you for Donald fucking Trump? Give us your answer. CTP, know the truth. God bless. Peace to the left, justice to the right.